mari est très de vierge. Donnez-moi la force d'accompagner la maladie de mes deux petits enfants.
This is Criteria. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Criteria. I'm James Majewski here with Thomas Miris. We're in a different format here, but welcome, Thomas.
Hey.
Yeah, we actually just saw the film that we're going to be talking about together not more than 3 hours ago. But now we are calling in remotely, trying to navigate around some construction noises. Is that right, Thomas?
Yeah. So we went down to the Film Forum, a little indie theater downtown in Manhattan. We're super stoked this was our first time in the theaters for, over a year.
Yeah.
I don't know what the last film I saw in a theater was. For you, you said it was A Hidden Life.
Yeah, another film that you and I saw together down at the Sheen Center when it had the special preview screening.
It was actually our first film discussion that we did for a podcast, although that was on the Catholic Culture podcast before Criteria started.
Right.
So yeah, today we're discussing a documentary called Lourdes that was released, I think, in France in 2019, but just released today, June 25th, in the U.S. And I'm hoping that it'll be playing in theaters around the country. I haven't looked into that, but we got to see it here in New York. I'm sure that if you are in, a major film city, like if you're in, at least if you're in New York or L.A. or maybe D.C. or Chicago or whatever, you should be able to see it, I hope. But I'll find some info about that and put it in the description after we do this, if I can help anybody find a place to see the film. So do you want to tell us who directed this film, James?
Yeah, sure. So this film's directed by two individuals, Albin Tourlet and Thierry Desmazières. I probably butchered the pronunciations of those.
Well, I asked him to do it because I don't know how to pronounce French.
Well, neither do I.
Names.
I can pretend.
So, well, I've been convinced for a while that you had special training on pronouncing French words and names because you always seem to do it fine on the podcast, but I guess you just prepared. This is a really interesting documentary. From what I understand, the two directors are not religious, but the person who is credited as having come up with the idea for the film and who is one of the writers is a Catholic. Let's see, what's her name? Sixtine Leon Dufour, I think.
Sounds good.
And she also is a hospitaler at Lourdes. She's one of the people who tends to the sick at Lourdes, or has been. I don't know if she currently is. So this, how can we start off with this documentary? It's
well, let me just stop you.
It's
real
not
quick.
a talking heads. Go ahead.
You mentioned that there's this woman who's credited as being a writer. So I'm kind of curious about that. This is this is a documentary. So what has she written? Do you know?
You know what? Someday we will have to learn about that. Because I know documentaries have writers, but I don't know quite what that entails. Now, I understand that a documentary has an editor, right? And I would think that a lot of the writer's job is the job of an editor in a documentary. But you can go in knowing more or less about what you're going to be filming beforehand, and so I think the writer is probably the person who creates the scenarios,
right?
Or not creates them, but who says, okay, we want to find this, we want to see this, and then they go out in the field and try to find those things. And depending on how much communication they have with the subjects of the documentary, they can plan that out more or less.
Right.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Now, if you're Werner Herzog, that may include actually telling someone to do things. It might include giving someone a line here or there,
Mhm.
even if it's a documentary. It might include saying, "Hey, can you go over and open this door and shut it over and over again," like he did in well, I forget the name of the documentary. Little Dieter learns to fly, I think, or Little Dieter needs to fly.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't tell you much more than that because I'm sure that it varies a lot from project to project what exactly the role of the writer is.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that a film like this probably benefited a lot from her involvement because
Oh, sure.
I mean, it strikes me as very much an inside job. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm kind of surprised to learn that the filmmakers themselves aren't religious or particularly religious, because it's just handled with such tenderness and insight that
Yes.
I'm sure that she, as being credited as the idea birther and the writer, probably had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. Well, this is the first documentary we've discussed on this podcast, correct?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, and that's worth remarking in itself because we, there's documentaries and then there's documentaries. There's documentaries that pretty much exist to convey information and maybe to some extent they'll convey an experience. Maybe there'll be still photographs and a lot of talking heads.
Yeah.
That's not really the sort of thing we're interested in discussing on this podcast because this is a film podcast
Right.
and it's about film as an art form. So we're more interested in things that are more in the direction of Werner Herzog or something like this film, because this film really puts you, it's shot as though it were a feature film. It really puts you in the experience of the subjects. There's very little talking heads. There's some voiceovers. Most of the time when you're seeing someone talking, it's a real scene. They're talking to someone. They're not talking to the camera.
Yeah.
Most of the information that you get that the filmmakers get directly from the people in the film is delivered by means of voiceover.
Right. There's kind of this preponderance of what I call shake and bake documentaries across streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon, where that they just got the green light on this documentary, shot it in a week, interviewed a bunch of people, pulled a bunch of images off of the internet, and then slapped something together. Maybe did some on location shooting or some B-roll. But yeah, you're right. Right from the beginning, this documentary really hits you as though it were a feature film. And there's really precise. There's real precision in everything that's done. It's not slapped together. So whether that's, the way that it's shot and cut, or whether that's the kinds of text, I call it text, but it's the spoken word that's integrated, even the conceit to capture some of this spoken word. You're right. There are no talking heads. There's no real voiceover except in these moments of prayer where, evidently the subjects have been asked to pray as they would. They're all on pilgrimage to Lourdes, but to pray out loud, which, I mean, that's kind of frightening, for myself at least, the idea of having to be that vulnerable. But it's certainly not unprecedented. We pray out loud all the time. So it's entirely believable that these people, with real devout yearnings are able to manifest those out loud so that the rest of us can hear them. And so even with that, there's this real kind of, there's like a director's hand, I don't want to overplay it and suggest that this is, all fabricated or something like that, but it is manipulated. And I mean that in the best sense, I don't mean it in the sense of tinkered with and sort of, that has kind of a negative connotation, but the way that a musician manipulates his instrument, handles it. The filmmakers really handle this subject and have a story that they want to tell, and they bring all of their particular skill and artistry to bear on this.
Yeah, and with regard to the precision of the filming, one thing that really helps is, as you say, the inside touch, right? You've got a person working on this film who knows the way people walk through this place and touch the rock, but also any film that is so much devoted to ritual can really gain from the predictability of certain motions that are going to occur, so that you can actually plan out how you're going to shoot it much more.
That's right.
And also, to be honest, a lot of the people they're filming can't move around.
Yeah.
Are sick or injured people
or
who can't
have
move around.
their own ritual, of the care that they need to receive.
Right. Very true. Yeah. Not only the religious rituals as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all factors that allow them to have a greater degree of precision and control while still allowing for spontaneous moments of personal connection in the film. And that all is greatly beneficial to the final product.
Yeah, I had never heard of this film, Thomas. I'm glad that you were following this and alerted me to this, and that we went out and saw it on its first day. I didn't.
Well, it's a product of me looking at cinemas more than for this film. I hadn't heard of this film either, but I was just looking at the very local indie theaters, which have been reopening in New York City, and saying what are they playing, and I came upon this one as one of the upcoming features.
Wow.
So I was really looking to see a movie.
Yeah, right on.
You know what I mean?
Right on. Well, this is a great way. I'm certainly familiar with this experience of just checking out the local art house theaters and seeing what's playing and putting yourself out there. Obviously, in this instance, there's a subject that we're both very interested in, and this being a Catholic film podcast, it's a no-brainer. Like, we got to go check this out. But I think it's also fun to just kind of, it's like the experience of going to a restaurant like that you trust and just ordering a menu item that you're not so sure about, but confident that you're going to experience something. I guess, you can't be too reckless with this method, because you don't know what you're going to end up seeing. It might be sinful, but I definitely recommend that as a practice for any listeners,
right.
Just checking out what's playing.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got people do this with movie theaters, right? People want to go see a movie, but if you're doing it with an indie theater, then you have a greater chance of probably seeing something really interesting, or maybe even a classic. It doesn't have to be a new movie, but just like that's what I was looking for. Is like I want to see what classic movies are playing, but in the course of that, I also saw that this was opening.
I was really glad that this was the film that was like my first film back in the theaters since the lockdowns.
Right.
I was just happy to be going to a movie theater again. It's funny that this conversation is turning to this right now. I wasn't necessarily planning on that, but
right.
it was just good to be in a room with other people, to hear like the guy a few rows ahead of me, like uncrinkling his wrapper and like putting his like candy in his mouth or something. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so annoying. But it was like an annoyance that was like endearing, in that I hadn't experienced it in so long.
Yeah.
But also,
we just had our mask mandates removed in New York, so it was really like there was nothing abnormal about the experience at all.
Yeah. I'll just say too, and I don't think that this is too much of a stretch, but this film is about pilgrims. It's about going on pilgrimage, and so much of the attention that this film turns its attention to so many of these gestures of sort of location and like tactile and like beingness, the experience, whether it's touching the rock or lifting the candles, or doing a procession, right? And obviously this is like of a lower order, but going to the movie theaters is very much analogous. It is its own kind of pilgrimage. I had to catch the 6 train. Took me a solid like 40 minutes to get to the theater, and I'm thinking about it. anticipating what I'm going to see, not really knowing. I have the experience, and then there's a return. And so I think that with film, it's not live. It's this dead medium. It's been recorded, and in a lot of instances, the films that you and I are watching on this podcast really are dead. Like everybody who worked on them or was a part of them is dead, and we're like watching these ghosts.
Right.
But there's like a element of liveness that is brought into the experience of the film when you're in a theater together with others. Even in that theater, as much as I'm aware of the guy who's making the noise with the crinkling, I'm also aware of the people who aren't making noise. I'm aware of the attention that's being directed to this film by everyone else. And
absolutely.
So yeah,
it's sort of like going to mass in the sense that like we're not turning to each other and talking and interacting like you might see at a Protestant service, but we are the presence of everybody focused on the same thing. Does make a difference. And it's funny that you bring that up because I just discussed this on an episode of the Catholic Culture Podcast. Actually, it went out today as we're recording this on the Criteria feed as well as a bonus episode. We were discussing Walker Percy's novel, The Moviegoer. Me and Nathan Douglas are guest host. And that's something that comes up in the film as well, where although in this case, in the protagonist of that novel, when he goes to see a movie in a theater, he has to talk to the owner beforehand of the theater so that he won't feel like he could have seen this movie anywhere.
Cool.
So I think let's talk about this movie. We already talked about kind of the that sort of documentary it is. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the subject matter.
Yeah.
So it's a Lourdes documentary, but as you say, it's kind of an inside look, and it particularly focuses on the sick people who are coming and the way that they're cared for. It kind of gives you the perspective of the people who are caring for them as well, although they get less less words in the film, I would say. I mean, the hospitalers get less words.
Yeah.
The relatives of the people get plenty of screen time.
Right.
But it's a wide range of people. There's elderly people. There's people who have suffered accidents. There's people who have conditions from birth. There's a couple of children in the film, and everybody has their own way of praying and their own way of trusting or not trusting.
Yeah.
There's people there's at least one person with a serious moral or psychological struggle. A man who is confused about his gender, and has been since childhood, and has lived a really rough, difficult life because of that. The film doesn't really, it's not really a film about miracles, but it is a film about the way that people respond to the prospect of a miracle, or the prospect of being in the presence of a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's the struggle for do I even want this? How will I feel if I get it and nobody else does? What am I getting out of these repeated trips to Lourdes, even if I'm not even really hoping for a miracle? All those different factors play into it, but there's also a lot about the people who are caring for their loved ones and the people who are caring for strangers, the people who work at Lourdes. That's very moving as well. So it's a very, it's the sort of thing that, you don't expect that non-religious people would make, but it's also the sort of thing that has a lot of human interest to it, perhaps for an open-minded, non-religious person as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this film does such a good job of capturing the breadth and the complexity, the nuance, the troubledness of what Lourdes is. It's like you said, Thomas, it's like this film is less about miracles and more about the human encounter with a miracle, or with the prospect of a miracle. I mean, I think we can say that this is an encounter with a miracle. There is from everybody in the film an acknowledgement that Lourdes is a miraculous place.
Right.
But obviously what they're all also hoping for, what kind of exists in the background of this film from the very beginning, the film opens with text saying, that there have been something like 70,000 recorded restorations to have happened at Lourdes.
I think it was 7,000. I think it was 7,000.
Oh, okay.
And then the church has recorded 70.
Correct. Okay.
Like miracles.
Right. Well, in any case, it opens with that text. And so right from the beginning, that's kind of in the background of your mind. And it exists through the whole course of the film.
Right.
And I think that it would have been very easy for this film to go one of two ways. I think, any number of filmmakers could have sent this film careening in one of two ways. One being a kind of saccharine, sugar-coated, feel-good kind of documentary that turns away from more of the difficult, almost dark night of the soul realities surrounding a place like Lourdes, where the people who are showing up there are showing up because they're suffering. Or on the other hand, kind of a despairing, dark look. I mean, it's acknowledged that for most, for the vast majority of the pilgrims, there isn't an evident healing, right? There isn't an apparent miracle. And so walking that line between these two temptations, these two easy human solutions to a difficult, kind of complicated, profound experience like the one at Lourdes, is something that this film doesn't fall into either of those. I think it goes right to the edge of those and yet stays, I don't want to call it in the middle as if this is some sort of like moderate film. What it stays in is like adhering to the experience. It's a very real film and it's very wide. There's like a great latitude in this film for engaging with it. I think, this is a film for religious people as much as it's also for non-religious people. Mm-hmm. And it's almost all the more moving for that. I can't recall the last time I was moved so much and so sustained. It was like nonstop movement in my heart.
There was at least 3 or 4 times. There was at least 3 times watching this that I actually cried.
Yeah.
Not just like teared up, you know. Had to bust out the tissue.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk about some of the particular people, just give some examples of some of the encounters, in the film.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most moving and beautiful is this father and his small son.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Who are going, the son has some kind of condition. I don't know if it's a fatal condition, but he is going to stay small, basically.
Yeah.
And then he has a younger son who does have a fatal condition and a very painful condition where his body is covered with sores and as he says, you can live for about 2 years with this, and he's 2 years old. So they're basically waiting for this child to die. That younger child doesn't come with him on the trip. His wife and the younger child, who's even more sick, stay home. But they go to pray for their family, basically, and they don't ask for a miracle, really. They ask for strength to bear the suffering. They ask for consolation. They ask for his younger son's pain to be soothed. They ask for another year with him. But there's such a detachment. They pray for another year and he just says that would be good.
Yeah.
Or something like that,
Yeah.
And the way that he prays, we get a lot of these characters' prayers out loud, and the way he prays is so contained and so intentional and so peaceful, it seems.
Yeah.
I was very moved by that.
Yeah. One of the most moving things in the film for me was seeing the love of this father who's guiding his young son through this experience of pilgrimage and of prayer and of intercessory prayer, on behalf of the family and on behalf of his youngest son, the boy's younger brother. It's like we don't get depictions of fatherhood, like good depictions of strong fatherhood in film. It's just, for whatever reason, in the stories that we tell, that's not something that's very prevalent anymore. And it's almost like we have to look back at reality. It's like, this is a documentary, and it's not lost on me the significance of that it's like we have to turn to real fatherhood to get these adequate images, because the adequate images aren't coming to us through the stories that we're telling in television or fictional film. So so that was amazing, because I was drinking deeply from this well of not only an adequate image of fatherhood presented to me, but also one that's real. This is a real father, and that was hitting me, where I live.
Yeah. My other favorite character is this guy in a wheelchair who can't talk. He spells out words using a grid of letters. And he just has this very playful and beatific smile, this very winning smile.
Yeah.
And you can tell that people love him. And he's asked, does your faith make your life easier? And he says, no.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful.
We learn later in the film that he had a really intense love affair that went bad and tried to kill himself twice, and it left him like this. But has just such a beautiful smile.
Yeah.
In the film.
Yeah.
I love that guy. And
well, it's what's true of him is true of so many, if not all, of the pilgrims that we encounter in this film, is that you really see how beautiful they are. I mean, one thing that's striking right from the beginning, and it's the same thing that's striking, I think, that about any time you walk into a Catholic church, this is something that I've tracked in my life and noticed, is that at church you see more disabled people, you see more elderly, you see more people who are in wheelchairs or disfigured than you do out and about at the mall or whatever. Very and I've often thought, if I wasn't Catholic, if I wasn't going to church, would I even be aware that these people existed? And certainly, Lourdes is sort of the experience of that on the highest level. And it's kind of intense at first. It's disturbing even, because there is real ugliness in these disabilities and in this disfigurement, in this suffering. But yeah, by the end, the beauty that is each of these human lives is so obvious. And at the end, too, you see some of the caregivers having to say goodbye to these people who have been with them for a week, and they're crying. They're it's
very moving.
Yeah.
It's like the emotional climax of the film.
Right. One of them
almost.
says, he has so much love to give or something. I don't know.
There's
who
so
they're
much
referring
that
to, but
you see in the film. One of my other favorite elements of the film is watching these young people who are working as caregivers and being initiated into this work at Lourdes, and just watching them, we see how, one of their, instructors or whatever is explaining to them about how to clean people. And you can just see from their faces that they're just like not looking forward to it, Yeah. And you see them interacting with people one-on-one, and you see these relationships grow, and it's very funny and joyous. And, and moving, and then at the end you just get this like heartbreaking moment of these like young women just like losing it.
Yeah.
When saying goodbye to this old woman.
You know, I think that is its own kind of miracle, right? Like this film is about miracles, and even if it's not necessarily like, obviously watching it, there's a part of you that wants to see, you know, the miraculous healing happen and stand, pick up your mat and walk. And not that that doesn't happen, right? But I recognize, you know, as an audience, as a viewer, that it's like, I want to, it's my curiosity that wants to see that. It's like, I want to be titillated. But there's something, and I don't think that I'm making this up. I don't think that this is just an ad hoc explanation because I didn't get to see the miraculous healing. But there's something like that's even more significant. There's something that touches me even closer, and it goes past my curiosity. It goes past like the excitement, and it touches, you know, reality and who I am and who God is. And
right.
And that's the miracle, right? And I don't think I'm being like, I'm not equivocating here, that there's a really strong sense exiting this film that is a miracle.
Yeah.
What's happening at Lourdes, and
well,
what
the
has
people
been
are going
happening at
to
Lourdes.
feel the presence of their mother. You know, that's reiterated over and over again, and that's something that's real and that they really experience.
Yeah, dude. When one of the parts that moved me so much was talking about that father and his son again. The father's on the phone with the mother, who's back at home with the other child, and the little boy who's 8 years old wants to talk to his mother, and we overhear her on the phone reminding him to make sure to pray for everyone else who is there asking for mercy and for healing. And I just like that was a part where I started to kind of tear up, because like, you know, that generosity of spirit, like I'm here seeking healing for myself and for my family, but don't forget to pray for everyone else there who's also, and not just, she didn't say like healing, she said mercy first, you know? And I thought that mom, she's really doing it right. 'Cause that's what our Blessed Mother has asked us time and time and time again to do, is to pray for poor sinners. And I so neglect this. I'm always praying for myself or for my family or for what I would like to see, you know, happen in my life or the lives of my family. And it's like, there's no greatness in that. I don't want to overstate the case. Like, obviously there is. It's an important function of my role as a father, but also petitionary prayer, you know. But you know, like in that moment, I heard our Blessed Mother's words, you know, echoed through the words of this mother to her child, and it was like, it was almost too much for me to handle. I very rarely cry at theaters, but yeah, there were 2 or 3 times in this film where you feel the pinch in the eyes and the sinuses start to you know, release.
Right. Yeah. I amen. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm really glad we saw this. I hope other people will be able to too. Again, I'll look up some info and see if I can find like some kind of directory of theaters that are playing this to put in the show notes or something. But yeah, just I highly recommend it. Not for kids, I guess.
Yeah.
They're showing real people in real life. You know, so there's some darkness, you know.
Yeah, references to suicide and you know, some serious sin, you know, which is like, again, part of the experience of Lourdes, but it's not probably not best for young children.
Yeah. Okay, James. Yeah, thanks for this, man. And that was fun. I'm glad we got to debrief about this a bit.
Yeah.
And I will we'll talk to you soon.
Good. All right. See you, everyone.